But today we're going to talk about the prison of offense. I wanted to start here because this is where it all starts when it comes to trouble in the marriage. Is that spirit of offense that we get on us and we don't even know it's coming. We don't see it coming. It starts the minute we start kind of keeping score. You know what I mean? And so we're going to talk a little bit about this. I want to read part of the scripture first. You don't have to have your Bible out. I'll read it. Here. I think that people feel like they have a right to carry around offense, and for some reason we feel kind of entitled to it and like it's okay with the Lord, and it absolutely is not, because what is offense? It's unforgiveness. And the Bible talks extensively about unforgiveness, and it's something that separates us from the Lord too, I believe. Let's go into Matthew. I'm going to go to the 5th chapter, verse 22. We may end up in this class getting into a curriculum. I so far have been really unsatisfied with the ones that I've looked at because it doesn't encompass everything that I'd like to encompass. So we may kind of partially use a curriculum, and we may just kind of flow with it, add the things that we need to add to it. There's also a guy on the internet that I really enjoy his teachings. He's from Elevation Church, and that's part of where I pulled this teaching from tonight. And so we may just watch some videos of his to supplement what we're doing, because he does some really good illustrations and stuff. He's pretty cool. He's so funny. Yeah.
What's his name?
His name is Stephen Furtick or something like that, yeah. All right. He's a pretty funny guy. Matthew 5:22. This is talking about anger here. It says, "But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. Whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire." So we're talking about your brother here, but isn't your husband or your wife considered your brother, right? So your fellow man. So when we look at this, we're not just talking about other people, but we're talking about our husband and wife. They'll be liable to judgment. Whoever is angry with their brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to counsel. That means actually going before the council, right? And whoever says you fool will be liable to hellfire. So Stephen Furtick, when he's talking about this, he's like, I don't know about you, but I've said way worse than you fool. You know what I mean? I think we all probably have, in the heat of the moment when we've been fighting, said things far worse than that. And so it's something that we need to take really seriously. It's right there in the scripture in front of us. We're going to mark this and we're going to come back to it here in a minute. But offense lives and grows in our heart. When we don't express it and get it out, it plants a seed, and that's right where it gets nurtured. And so it starts out really small, and then it gets bigger and bigger. And we know this because out of the abundance of our heart, our mouth speaks. And so, one day we find all of a sudden that our mate is saying things that just sound really hurtful and hateful. We can't figure out where that's coming from. That's come from a place of offenses. Offenses have grown in their heart. It's starting to change their behavior and their attitude because the abundance of their heart is starting to pour out. So when you find that your significant other is starting to act a little strange, things aren't right, that's when you stop right then and you start to deal with it. You don't let it go any farther. You can't let it go any farther. Because if you do, you're going to find yourself way down the road and thinking, how did I get here? Well, it's because we didn't address what was going on, okay? And we have all been guilty of this. So when I talk to you, I'm not talking at you. I'm talking from experience and in my life. And so we're all in this together, okay? In fact, as I'm reading this, I'm finding good suggestions and healing through what I'm studying. So it's really good. We live in a day where everybody's easily offended. So you have to watch everything you put on Facebook, you know what I mean? And everything you put on Instagram, because something you say is gonna offend somebody and they're gonna get mad about it, right? It's because we live in such an age of selfishness and entitlement that we can't understand that anyone in this world would have a view different than ours, right? And so when they do, we're offended because they have an opinion that's different than our opinion. It's absolutely ridiculous. But it filters into our intimate relationships. Even when we love and know and understand somebody, and we pretend that we accept them fully, when they offer up an opinion that's different than ours, all we want to do is force them to have our same opinion. It's exactly the same thing. And that's a lot of why we fight, because we just can't get them to see it our way. We can't accept that I may have one reality and you might have another reality. And that's perfectly fine. That's okay. It's, can we find a place of compromise or agreement in that and move on beyond that instead of beating it in the head? You know what I'm saying? Because that's what we do. We want to force somebody to see it our way. So what's funny about that is that Christians are some of the biggest ones guilty of this. It's so funny. Somebody said the other day, and I thought that's so true, Jesus isn't offended when somebody cusses. He's not offended when somebody makes a foul joke. He's not offended, you know what I mean? We shouldn't be offended. When Jesus was here on earth, he saw things, I'm sure, and walked through things, I'm sure, and didn't get offended by them. There's nothing he's not seen, right? He sees it all the time. And so we act like a cuss word like that has never been spoken. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they just said that. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is. Jesus is seen and known in all. You shouldn't be offended. That's part of what keeps us from being able to win the loss, is that we're so offended by everything that goes on that's not according to our opinions and ideas. You know what I mean? We want to be offended for Jesus. It's pretty funny. But what's funny about that is that Jesus was the one guy who took on everybody's offenses, right? And he also dropped every offense that we've committed against him, right? We're the ones, personally, who offend the Lord by our sin. We don't need to be offended for him, but he dropped all that offense when he went to the cross. He took it all on himself and he dropped it. And so he's our example in that. We have to understand that Satan's overall goal in the end is destruction. Okay? So we know that for everything. We just read that in that prophecy from Tisha. His overall goal is destruction. Ultimately, it's destruction of God's kingdom. So where does that start? That starts at home, right? And so his overall goal is destruction. His strategy is division, right? So how am I going to accomplish this destruction? Well, let's divide them, right? And then his tactic is offense. So how do I divide them? I cause them to be offended at one another. So that's why we started here, because this is the very heart of it. We could start talking about division, or we could start talking about the destruction of marriages, but we're not getting down to the root of the problem. What is the root of the problem? It's the offenses that we hold against one another. Okay? And this gets into some shaky areas when we're talking about things like mental, verbal, physical abuse. When we're talking about one person really being a victim in a bad marriage, that gets a little bit different. When we talk about adultery and things like that, that gets a little bit different. We get into areas that go beyond just, mutual things that we do to offend one another. And we'll get into some of those things because I've been through all of those things. And so that's something I feel like I could speak to. And so we'll get into some more heavy places. But right now, we're going to talk about kind of the little foxes that spoil the vine, because more than not, those are the things that really end up destroying a marriage in the end. Some of us are able to get past the big things and find healing and forgiveness, whether that's through counseling or whatever it might be, but we can't seem to let go of the stupid little things for some reason, and we don't even realize that we've not let them go. So he wants to separate you just like he wants to separate the church from Christ. Okay, because we are a model of that. Christ loving the church being the bride, right? So just like he wants to take Christ out of the church and make the churches as un-Christ-like as possible, he wants to do that in your marriage. He wants to separate you from one another. We have to deal with offense and keep Satan on defense. If we were under constant attack and assault on the enemy, he wouldn't have time to come at us, right? If we were keeping prayed up together and unified and recognizing the tactics of the enemy before they even come at us, because that's a big part of, spiritual discernment. If the Spirit of Christ is really alive in us in our marriage, then we're going to be able to discern those moments when we're having a fight. We can say, oh, this isn't even us. This is the enemy causing this. How many of you guys have had times when you can feel that? Like, Satan's at work right now. This isn't us. This is something more than that going on. And so we can thwart the enemy's plans if we're bombarding him instead of letting him bombard us all the time. But too many times we're sitting back and being the victim and having to play offense all the time, right? Instead of coming at him and putting him in his place in our marriage. And so we want to make sure that we're putting him on the defense. The plank in your eye is made up of a lot of little specks. So that scripture that talks about how I've got a plank in my eye and I'm worried about the little speck of dust in my brother's eye, right? And so I think that we have to realize a lot of times when we're dealing with our spouse that we're not going to be able to help them through their offense until we look at ourselves and get through our junk, right? And that junk that's in our heart, in our life, what we've been talking about this from the beginning now, is little things that build up and build up and build up. And so you don't necessarily have to go back and deal with each one of those little things one by one, but there are going to be some of those things that stand out to you. Have you ever been in a fight and something from 5 years ago comes up and you think, so I can't remember what you bought me for Christmas that year and the sweetheart thing you did for me on Valentine's Day, but I can remember when you put my purse in the wrong place. You know what I mean? How stupid is that? But there's going to be things that are kind of pet peeves or things that just stung you a little bit more. And a lot of times they're because you've got some sort of a hang-up or an issue about that, whether that stems from your past, like past hurt, or wherever that comes from. There are things that stand out. And so I would say those things definitely need to be addressed. We don't have to sit down and make a list of every little thing, but those things that are kind of coming to the forefront of our mind often when we're having arguments and stuff, those are definitely things that have built up and made that big plank in our own eye that we need to sit down and kind of line out and say, okay, I feel like these are things that we haven't got out in the open and we need to talk about them. Okay, and it starts here. It doesn't start with them. They don't have the problem, you do. Okay, and if you're both realizing that, then that's how this is going to get worked out. If one person realizes it and the other one refuses to, you're going to have a problem. Okay, the closer your relationship, the greater the opportunity for your offense. Okay, and so that's what you need to think about when this is happening and you feel really hurt. You need to understand that unless you really, really love this person, there wouldn't be so much room for hurt, because it's the people we love the most who can hurt us the most. And so the more intimate we are with one another, the more we love each other and we're around each other all the time, the more we have the ability to hurt each other. So don't look, if you're really offended against your spouse and you're finding you guys are arguing all the time, don't look at that like you have some horrible marriage and there's love loss here. It could be that you have a lot of passion between you, and that passion comes out in other ways. So, they talk about that all the time with Spanish people, that they have this passion going on. They yell and scream at each other one minute and the next minute they're making love, but at least there's passion there and it's not dried up. You know what I mean? So don't be too hard on yourselves. Frank and I have went through times when we just have had some barn burners. You know what I mean? Rip the house down fights. And he said to me, man, I never fought with my ex-wife like this. What's wrong with us? I said, it's because you didn't love your ex-wife like you loved me. That's what, you know what I mean? So, there's a lot of passion in the air going around here. So, all right, let's look at, get back into Matthew. I'm going to read the next few verses after that, 5:23 through 26. So verse 23 says, so if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. So, God's telling us in no uncertain terms that we need to drop this thing before we find ourselves in the midst of judgment, in the midst of something far worse than just judgment. Satan takes two and makes them one, or God takes two and makes them one, but Satan takes one and makes them two. That really, when I heard that on this video I was watching, I thought, man, I gotta write that down, because that makes so much sense. God takes two and makes them one. Satan takes one and makes them two. In the modern marriages that we have now, a lot of times the modern philosophy is, you want to make sure that you stay your own person. Don't get lost in that other person, and watch out. You're, especially with women, there's a lot out there, and I'm all about strong, independent women, okay? Obviously I am. But when it comes to marriage, some of our modern philosophy can get in the way of us bonding together. If our husband is loving us like Christ loved the church, right? And we are in love with him, and we're willing to follow him as he helps lead us through life, and that beautiful picture that comes from the Word of God is happening in our relationship, there's absolutely no reason why we have to constantly think about, am I keeping my independence? You know what I mean? Am I getting too lost in my husband? Because God's purpose was for us to become one. You know what I mean? It really was. So Satan would love nothing better than to make us two individuals who are trying to think for themselves and trying to move forward on their own. It causes discord in our homes, right? We start to disagree on how things should be done. We start to undermine our husband or our wife in front of our children. That's something we'll get into a lot when we're talking about kids, because that's one of the worst things that you can do in front of your kids, is to argue about their discipline and show that you are divided and double-minded about the way that they should be dealt with. And so that's his ultimate goal. Settle matters quickly or end up in a prison of offense. And that's what the scripture was just showing us in Matthew 23 through 26. So God understands how we're made, and he knows that if we don't settle things fast, they start to take root, and they're a lot harder to get rid of. And that's what that scripture is about. The Bible tells us not to go to bed angry, and that's one reason why. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take long if we don't sit down and settle things and talk them out before we're hurt and really wounded, and we don't even know why we've gotten so hurt and wounded, where it came from. And then we've got to wait out, am I rightfully so? Is this me? Is this them? And it starts to get a lot more complicated than what it would have been if we would have talked about it right then and there and said, what you said just really hurt me there. And that may seem silly to you, but it really stung my heart. And so let's talk this through. Okay? All right. When these little offenses start, we don't think about where they will lead eventually. We never think when we're fighting over our toothbrushes or whatever it is, that this could lead to us eventually sitting around the attorney's table dividing up our assets. Okay? None of us think, especially when we're starting out a relationship, we feel like our relationship is invincible, right? And so that would never be us. But it takes us just turning our head for a little while and ignoring the little things in order for us to find ourselves at that point where somebody's either become so messed up that they're off, finding themselves on the brink of an affair, or we're so messed up that we're talking about filing divorce, or we're separating, whatever it might be. We never think that that's going to happen to us. When, we're having these little fights and they seem stupid and they don't seem like they're ever going to amount to anything. But we have to begin to pay more attention. I'm not talking about giving those things more presence. I'm saying that when these little things happen, we need to give them attention as far as addressing them right then and there and having them be done. Okay, not making them a bigger deal than what they're supposed to be is what I'm saying. Okay, all right. A lot of offenses come from unintentional things that are said. Can anybody relate to this? Hallelujah, amen. Okay, so Stephen Furtick gave this example of this when he was talking. He said, my mom, one year for Thanksgiving, had made stuffing, and my grandma had made stuffing, and we all went over there and we were eating, and he said my dad was eating my mom, or his mom's stuffing, my grandma's stuffing. And he's like, Mom, your stuffing is so good. I'm telling you, no one will ever make stuffing like your stuffing. I just love it. And his mom the whole time is taking this, like, stab me in the heart. You know what I mean? Like, he is doing this to get at her. You know how it is when you've been fighting maybe right before you went in somewhere, and so this unintentional thing that your spouse is saying or doing, you're taking it and completely twisting it, right? And they've got to be talking about me right now. This has to be a tactic to stab me in the heart right now. And he said my mom literally would not make my dad stuffing for like the next 3 years until they finally figured out that's why she wasn't making stuffing, because she was convinced that that's why he was complimenting his mom's stuffing. So it's that kind of stupid. It sounds so stupid, but it can make a big difference in your marriage and in your life, because then that starts coming down to, well, if he doesn't like my cooking, he doesn't have to have my cooking, right? And so the wife's not, well, just go out to eat. And the husband's like, man, she doesn't even care enough for me anymore to cook a meal for me, you know? And that's part of how women show love, right? Is to cook and do things that please their husband like that. And sometimes husbands do that for their wives and show love that way. But that's one way that we show love towards one another, is serving. And so she doesn't want to serve me anymore. What's that about? And that leads to a much larger hurt because of something completely unintentional. And the next thing on the second page here, sometimes it's an unmet expectation because of unexpressed expectation. So an unmet expectation because of an unexpressed expectation. We can't expect somebody to read our minds. So sometimes there's things that we have as expectations for our spouse, and we've never said a word about them, and we just expect them to read our mind and know that that's what we want. And then when they don't meet my expectation, I'm going to be offended at them. And you know, you may not even realize that you're doing that, but I'll give you a really good example. Not that long ago, you know, all these years, Frank and I have been married. The first year that we were married was his 30th birthday, so I threw him a bigger party, invited people out to eat, and I bought him a nice gift. You know, it was his 30th, so I did it up a little bit bigger. And then after that, you know, money was always kind of tight for us, so, you know, we did little things like that. Usually it was just kind of getting the family together and going out to eat. Well then, year before last, I think it was, came time for his birthday, and for me, when it's my birthday, all I want is to be with my kids and my husband and just sit down and have a nice meal, and like I'll tell them I don't want to do anything all day. I just want to be able to relax and you guys do the dishes and all that. To me, that's heaven, right? But it didn't click with me. It never clicked with me that when Frankie was little, it was always big birthday parties. That's why his mom always made a big deal. Always had a big party, always had a cake, always invited a lot of people. And that's what he expected for his birthday. So all these years that I was just kind of getting the family together and going out to eat and not really bothering getting a cake or balloons or anything big like that, except for on the big mile markers, he was taking that as an offense, and it was starting to make a seed in his heart. I didn't even realize. You know, it's something simple, a cake and some balloons, and just making a little bit of a bigger deal about that says to him, you care about my birthday, right? And some people, it's just about getting a card, but it's all kind of about, a lot of times, our past experiences and what says I love you to us, you know what I mean? So we'd show up at the Chinese restaurant, because I knew he loves a Chinese buffet, and it was just going to be me and him and the kids. I thought, he's going to love this, right? Because that's his favorite place to eat. And at the time, we didn't have much money to eat out, so I'd saved up to make sure we had enough that Sunday to go out. And we get in the parking lot, and he's like, so is anybody else coming? And I'm like, no, it's just us, honey. And he's like, oh, and I can see it on his face. And I mean, he just is so hurt. He's like, I think we should just get fast food and go home. And I'm like, I start getting offended, because here I planned this, I saved this money, I'm so mad at him. We start screaming at each other, you know what I mean? And when it came down to it then, he finally, we really had to go through a few fights, you know, bringing that back up to even get to the heart of the matter there. And I said, baby, if you would have told me all these times, just told me, I like parties. I like to have a lot of people there. They don't have to buy me presents, but I like to have a lot of people there. I like balloons. I like party hats. I like, You know what I mean? If you would have told me, I would have went out of my way to do that. And so that is a good example of an unmet expectation because an expectation wasn't expressed. So if you know that something's important to you and your husband and wife has not been doing that for you, if you're like me, you'll just keep passing it off like it's not a big deal, right? That's what I do. But you don't know what's actually kind of getting hurt in here about that. So instead of suppressing that and knocking that down, you need to go in and talk about it and just say, hey, I really like for this to happen on my birthday, or on Valentine's Day, I really wish you'd be just a little bit more romantic, or it hurts me when you don't do something special for our anniversary, whatever it is. I'm talking about occasions, but there's much more to that than just that. Even with the way that you raise your kids, if you have an expectation that your husband's going to change diapers more and you don't feel like he's helping out, don't shove that down inside. Talk to him about it and say, hey, I really expected that when the baby came, you would split this up with me a little bit more, because that little thing can lead to some big, big, big stuff. Okay? All right. So there's infinite potential for offense for an intimate, close relationship. We kind of covered that already. The possibilities are endless, and throughout your marriage, it's not going to stop, so you're going to have to continue to watch for it. It's not like just one day you're healed from ever being offended again. So once you get it right, keep it right. Do you know what I'm saying? Keep it right. All right. So the person that we love the most can hurt us worse. I said that earlier. Stop keeping score. Okay? I don't want to camp out here for just a minute. Does anybody know what time it is? We should have plenty of time because I plan on even showing a video.
So
what is it?
18 till.
18 till, okay, cool. So stop keeping score. We all do this whether we want to admit it or not. There's that little ticker in our head, putting the little slash marks. And one of the biggest things that we do that with is I apologize first the last time. Right? I'm not going to give in this time because the last several times I've been the first one to say I'm sorry. This time he's going to say he's sorry to me. Okay, everybody's smirking. Raise your hand if you've done that. There's like no way, dude, I haven't done that. No, it's.
I bet he apologizes first every time.
You think every time?
He's sleeping on the couch.
So it depends on what the punishments are, doesn't it? Whether or not you're willing to do it. Anyways, but we keep score like that in our minds, and we cannot do that. The thing is, again, if we're not functioning healthy enough to where that's kind of 50-50 and we're owning up for what we do when we do it, then there's a whole other thing that needs to be addressed. It needs to go way beyond keeping score, and it needs to be, wait a minute, we need to talk about this because I'm owning up for my stuff. And when we're arguing, you're not owning up for your part of it, I feel like. And so let's talk about that. If your husband or wife says something like that to you, you need to take inventory and say, am I doing that? When we fight, am I not seeing the things that I'm doing? Because a fight is not always about one single thing. Even as we're fighting, we're doing things that are hurting each other. And when we apologize, we need to say, even if what we're fighting about has absolutely nothing to do with our fault, okay? But if we raise our voice, or if we say something that's a little bit catty or hurtful, we need to take ownership for that right away and say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have acted that way just now. Or that was completely uncalled for. Because when we do that, we start the apology ball rolling. Do you know what I mean? And it makes it a little bit easier for the person who's done the main offense here to stop and say, you know what, I'm sorry too. Sometimes it's just saying that first, I'm sorry. And so it could even be that it's totally not our fault, but we could say something like, I'm sorry that I didn't hear you. You know what I mean? That I'm not really listening. Whatever it is, we all have some part of it. Most fights are not one-sided. Most fights, we've both done something to cause that, or there's something that we could have done better. Bless you, sissy. Most fights. And so stop keeping score. You don't get permission to act wrong because your spouse has acted wrong. You don't get permission to retaliate because they've done something bad. Your job when you're a Christian, okay, your job is to forgive unconditionally, love unconditionally. That never stops that never changes according to what somebody does to you. So I don't care, and I'm gonna go extreme, but I don't care if somebody's being abusive to you. That does not give you the right to act in a sinful way towards them. If that means you gotta eventually get out and leave, that's fine. But while you're in that situation, you don't get to act like an idiot back to them. It doesn't excuse it, okay? And so that's something that's a little bit different about a Christian family and a Christian relationship. And even if you were to go to secular counseling, they might tell you different. But in God's realm, that's the way it works. And most of the time, because of that extravagant love and forgiveness, that's what helps bring about healing to your spouse. They start to see it's just like God loving us so much that He's so graceful and accepting and merciful that Him being God alone is enough to make us want to turn and do right. If I've got a wife who is putting up with my mess and loving me through all my junk, and I see that no matter what I'm laying on her, she is loving me through it, that's going to touch my heart eventually. I'm going to see that. If it doesn't, something's wrong. That's going to touch my heart and make me say, man, she's really laid it all down for me. I want to be better for her. I want to change for her. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen, especially when the proper steps are taken to bring about healing. So it's not them who you hurt with your offense and payback, it's you. I mean, in the end, really, it is. The more ugly you act, the more ugliness that you're going to get back, and the ball's just going to keep rolling. And so we have to realize that we've played a part in it, even if it wasn't us really causing the trouble to begin with. You've got to learn to drop it after it's been talked about, not suppress it. So we talked about Jesus doing that. He's the main one who dropped every offense that we've made towards Him and said, I'll forgive you. And I open up my heart to you. But there's a big difference between dropping it and just eating it and suppressing it. If you are a people pleaser like me, and I'm a person who will forgive to a fault, and that's made me a doormat in my life, okay? And I've had to realize that now that I've been married to Frank's actually got himself in trouble because he taught me how to stand up for myself, you know what I mean? But anyways, he said to me, Amy, because of your forgiveness, you make yourself a doormat, and there's a big difference here. There's a way to show extravagant love and grace and mercy and not be a doormat. It's a fine line, but it's there, okay? God tells us not to be angry and not to hold offense, but He never says that we don't stand up for ourselves in times when we need to say, hey, wait a minute, what you're doing right now, I'm not going to put up with, and if you keep up, I got to go, or whatever it might be. So anyways, that's a big line there, and that's something we can get into later. But if you're a person like me, you'll have a tendency to suppress things because it's not worth the fight. And in fact, you may love your spouse so much that you think, I hate fighting with him. I don't even want to go there. I'll just let it go. I'll forgive him and move on. But we find later on that those things are still in there. And so we're not doing anybody any favors. That's not really love. It's just like I talked about that Sunday, the last Sunday that I taught. It's just like loving our kids. It's not love to just let them do whatever they want. And it's not love to just let your spouse walk all over you and let them do whatever they want. Okay, it's love when you bring about the right kind of correction, but with our spouse it's a little bit different. Just bringing that to the forefront and dealing with that together. So we find ourselves in a place where we don't even understand why we can't get through to God. Well, it's because we're carrying around so much offense. We talk about that when it comes to church, being offended at church and all that, or having an offense with our brother or sister. But it's the same way. If we're walking through a marriage where there's so much offense and so much turmoil and stuff going on at home, we come in. There's been times in my life where I feel like I'm coming into church and being a robot because at home everything's such a mess. I don't even feel worthy when I walk in the door. You know what I mean? Because of all the fighting and turmoil that's been going on. Because I know that I'm carrying around hurt and offense, and so I can't even properly minister because all I can think about while I'm singing is my mess and my junk, you know what I mean? And that's, that's not a place of maturity. We all go through it, and it's okay, but we've got to move past that if we're going to be effective in ministry and all that. And we talk about all that all the time, that our households have to be right first. Before we can be effective in our ministry, we got to get this right here together, you know what I mean? So I love this quote, and I can't remember who it was who said it, but it said, forgiveness is setting a prisoner free and finding out that the prisoner was you. Okay? When we constantly make our problems somebody else's problem, we constantly place the blame on the other person, and we constantly look at ourselves like we're the victim, we can never find true forgiveness. Never. We can never find true forgiveness. It's about opening ourselves up to the whole picture. It's about understanding our part in the whole picture. And until then, we can't ever be completely free. Carrying offense is your decision. And we have to realize that too. And that's what I was talking about being a victim. When I hold on to things, I'm making a decision to hold on to those things and not let them go. If you have a hard time letting go, you can go to counseling and things like that, and certainly those type of things help. But until you have got down on your knees and ask God, help me with, and really honestly holding on to offense in a way is selfishness. And so dealing with selfishness, okay? God, help me be more like you, because you were so unselfish that you were able to lay down every offense against you. It's really hard to get offended all the time if you care very little about yourself, and your love and your concern is more projected out on people, okay? And their happiness. And so when we want to let go of offense and get rid of it, about the only way to do that, if we're really having a hard time, we've talked through it with our spouse, right? We've got it out in the open, because it doesn't need to get dropped until then, right? But we've addressed it, we've talked about it, we've come to an understanding, and I still can't let go. The only way to do that is through prayer. The Spirit of Christ, the more it's alive in me, the more I'm full of the Holy Ghost, the more that those emotions are going to melt away. Anything that's unlike Him is going to go away, because the Spirit of Christ is in here. It's alive in me. It's at work. I'm a different person when I'm full of the Holy Ghost. A family member of mine recently did something that just completely blew our minds. And Mom said, how in the world could this person that we know do this? I can't comprehend this. And I said, because when we are not full of the Spirit of Christ, we're all capable of unimaginable things. We all are. Unimaginable things. I've done things in my life during a period of coldness and disconnection between me and the Lord that I look back on and I say, that could not have even been me, because I would have never done that to people. I would have never done that to somebody. But because I didn't have the Holy Spirit stirred up inside, I let the flesh come in, I let the enemy come in, and you're a different person. You really are a different man, a different woman. And so that's the only thing that's going to help you get rid of that, if you can't lay it down after you've talked it out. So when we come back together again, we're going to take the next step beyond this. I think that we've covered offense pretty well today, but I'm going to kind of give you guys an assignment, okay? So as we walk through these, I'm going to give you new assignments. Something that I want you to do is I want you to get together with your spouse, and I want you guys to sit down, and you need to do it on a time when you can be alone and you don't have kids around and you've got a moment to talk, because some of these things might sting a little bit when you do, okay? And so don't be worried about stirring up a big fight, because if you both pray before you do this and you keep a right head, this is going to be a good exercise for you, not a bad thing. But again, make sure that the kids are kind of off and away and you got time to talk. And I want you to sit down and I want you to start going through some of the things that come to your mind that have brought offense to your heart, that you feel like are still unresolved. If you come to a point where you see that there's a little bit too much to wade through in a night, agree to shelf those things and come back to them again. But I don't want you to let go of this exercise until it's done. Till you come to the end of it, till you feel like you've talked about everything that needs to be talked about and get it out of the way, okay? And it may take, we may be through a 6-week course before you think you guys have even finished brushing things into the dustpan, you know what I mean? But really honestly, this is the first place. This is where it starts. So even if you feel like you have a super healthy marriage, some of you guys are in here, Heather and Dwayne are still kind of considered, I don't know, how long have you guys been married now? 4 years, so you're still kind of in the newlywed kind of stage. So some of you have a really great relationship going on right now, but listen to what I'm saying. From the day you get married, sometimes even before that, that's when these little offenses start. And so right now, things may not be bothering you very much, but if you let them go too much longer, they will. So even those of you that feel like you've got a really solid marriage right now, take some time and do this. Frank and I will do this at home. And I'll give you an update on how it went. And so hopefully it didn't end with us like throwing dishes around the house. No, we don't do that. But anyways, so all right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and pray, and then we're gonna be dismissed. Well, actually, what time is it? Do we have time for question and answer at all?
It's 5:02.
Oh, we got some time. Let's not pray yet. Let's talk for a minute. Does anybody have any comments or anything they want to say about what we've been talking about? That's it. Good.
It's easy to do to put this stuff, just have like, I don't want to fight about it, I don't want to talk about it, because it's going to make me feel hurt again.
Yeah.
But I'm going to keep feeling hurt and I'm to talk about it.
And there's a right and a wrong way to speak about it, because if we're not careful and we come out with it like it's an accusation or a weapon, then all we're going to get is defensiveness, and it's just going to grind the knife in deeper. So when you guys do this, you need to say, as we're giving these things out to one another, we're going to agree to really hear the heart of these things with love and understanding. Because it doesn't matter, if Mark said to me, Amy, it offends me totally that you wore a black shirt in here today. No matter how unreasonable that is to me, that he cares that I wore a black shirt, that's still his reality, and that offended him for some reason. And that should hurt my heart that the person that, I love Mark as Brett, but anyways, but that should hurt my heart that a person that I love is offended by this. I shouldn't want that to happen, no matter how ridiculous I think it is. And we have to remember that as these people are saying these things to us, they're not saying you did this on purpose. Because that's the other thing that happens. Well, I did that because da-da-da-da-da. We don't need to give the because they're not saying necessarily, unless they're saying, I feel like you did it on purpose. They're not saying you did it on purpose. They're just saying, it hurt my feelings. And so it's as easy as saying, I am so sorry I hurt you, and meaning it. And saying, I will try my best to never do this again. Please give me grace if I do. And if I do, please call me on it. Tell me, because I don't ever want to hurt your heart. It's that easy. And you need to mean it, but it really is that simple. So when you come out with it, be careful how you present it. And when you're accepting, you be careful how you react. Because we get in our flesh, we want to get offended that they're offended. And then we get in the offended loop. It just keeps going around and around.
Something I had to learn to do with that is I always try to explain what I meant. Like sometimes the person, my wife would get offended with something that I said or something that I did, and I'd be like, well, that's not, then that person, might not even be my wife, maybe somebody else that I've been trying to explain it to.
Right.
Then it's like, then they feel like I'm just trying to justify
it, yes.
What I've done, and that's not even what has to happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how I did or what I said or whatever.
Right.
It's accepting that however I said it or what I did, how it affected them.
Yeah.
And that's always sometimes a hard thing to do, because what you meant to do isn't at all, just like you said, you wore a black shirt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mean to offend you. Why are you getting, and then it kind of plays back, and then you become offended,
Right.
like you said, because they,
So what I tried to do, because I'm an explainer.
Yeah.
I'll explain all day, and I'll say it 5 times over.
Yeah.
So what I try to do with Frank, I've learned, is to acknowledge first his hurt.
Right.
And to apologize about it no matter what. Just flat out, I hear you.
Right.
I want you to know you're heard, and I am so sorry.
Yeah.
And then I'll try to ask, is it okay if I explain to you why I did that, just so you understand it would make me feel better if you understood my heart on it. You know what I mean? And my heart on it was this, and this is why I did it this way. And I'm so sorry, that probably makes no sense to you. You know what I mean?
Usually, like, when I think about it, and I do that, I actually end up saying, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
That's not at all,
Right.
what I meant, get
Yeah.
it, and, you know,
And hopefully if they'll let you explain, not over-explain, but just kind of explain, this was my heart, this is what I meant by it, then it will help bring them a little bit of extra healing there. But what they need first is acknowledgement that they're hurt and that you hear what they're saying. That's a big deal, is to let somebody know, I hear what you're saying. And this is something that's really goofy, but this is something that I have learned through counseling, and it works. Because I've had to go to counseling a few times, I admit it, and that's okay. It's all right to need counseling every once in a while. So one thing that we learned that I think is really good is to say, this is what I heard you saying, this is what I think you're saying to me, and you say it out loud. And you're very careful not to twist their words, but try to repeat what they're saying back to them, and say, is this what you're meaning? Because I want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. That's a good way to do it. Now, it comes off really sarcastic if you're really in the middle of a big fight and you're like, so this is what I think you just said, is that right? You know what I mean? You have to be really careful. But if you can stay calm and talk to one another and say, this is what I'm hearing you say, and I want to make sure that I'm accurately addressing what you just said to me. That's a good way to do it if you can stay calm enough to do it. But we'll get even more into that stuff too. But anybody else have anything before we pray?
You don't fight.
You don't fight? That's pretty cool, because I know.
No, we do.
Oh, you do? I saw the way you look at you. But I've heard people say,
She is also a liar.
we don't fight. And what they mean by that is we're able to discuss calmly, and that's really cool when you put it in words.
No.
Yeah, Frank and I finally learned how to do that, but we spent a lot of years like
There's nothing
atomic bomb
wrong.
going off kind of fighting.
We're both really different in how we fight.
Yeah.
Like, he's a yeller, and I'll fight
I'm
like
a
this.
manipulator.
Yeah.
I am, but I will kind of manipulate the situation to make it worse.
Girls are good about that, and turning on the waterworks, and yeah, girls are good about that.
I'll argue with this. It's not always the best.
It hasn't gotten abusive, so that's good.
That's good, that's a good part, right? Yeah.
it's an older book, and everybody's probably already read it, but me, because I don't read, but I just got done reading Experiencing the Father's Embrace by Jack Frost. Have you read that one?
I've heard somebody else say it.
It opened my eyes to many things. It wasn't just, for me, it wasn't just about experiencing the Father's love and understanding the Father's love, but it helped me with a lot of this,
Right.
with offense, with how because I'm someone that likes to suppress, and I just build a wall and then I just hide behind it, and it helped break down, and it's been a life changer in a marriage to me.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's amazing what books you think is going to help a certain thing, but that's
Right.
totally changed, our marriage.
Well, that's because that's what it all ties back to.
Yeah.
We really have to, especially with our spouse, have to imitate that love
Yeah.
from God.
And that's what was so neat about it, to talk about the love and intimacy to have with your spouse, with your kids, with, everybody here, and, how you're supposed to really walk that out.
Right.
It's just like,
One thing Frank has said to me is that you'll have patience and understanding for everybody else but me. Because I always try to be a non-judgmental, really patient person with people, because I deal with so many different people at church and other things. And they'll say, I watch you with people, and you'll be quiet and listen to what they have to say. You're patient, you're understanding, and then I try to tell you something important for me, and you're talking all over me.
you might like this book too,
Really?
because it talks about, and I'm not saying that you do this, but it talks about how his first job, and then once he had a life-changing experience, he took what that job was and then he hid behind ministry. And everybody that he ministered to got everything,
Right.
but what his spouse and kids got were totally something different.
Right, yeah.
And I'm not saying that you're that
Yeah.
way, but it was just like, oh,
Yeah, well, I certainly was one of those people who, and I get this from Dad, I'm a fast talker. Frank
Yeah.
talks super slow, super slow. And he takes a long time to think about what he's going to say. That makes me crazy. So, yeah, she agrees like
Well,
mine.
the fast talking.
Same, you talk
Yeah.
so slow.
That's what Frank will say.
look like you don't think that.
Frank will say,
Isn't that fun?
Frank will say, I didn't mean it like that. I'm then like, say what you mean then, you know? You didn't give me time to get through it. So
In
we,
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's get on with it.
so I hate that when somebody does that to me where they're constantly anticipating what you're about ready to say. And so they're just like, and I do that to him. So that's one thing that I really stopped doing and why our marriage has gotten a lot better over the last few years is because it came to the point of meltdown with us because of that. Because he said, you don't listen to me. And because of that, I feel like you're not my friend. And we were best friends. And so that's one of those things where it's little bitty things and you never think it's going to take you to this huge crossroads, but it does. And I mean, to the point where my big, strong, beefy husband sitting there bawling in front of me. And I thought, my God, I just can't even comprehend that because I'm a fast talker and I talk over him some in our fights, that it would get him this broken. I mean, it was really hurting him. And so then we get into that keeping score thing. Well, that's a little thing compared to these other things he's done. It doesn't matter. To him, that was like, break my heart, tear my heart out. If you don't listen to me, then we have nothing kind of thing. That's when you stop and you pay attention and you say, man, I should have saw this a long time ago when you told me for the 50th time, why don't you listen to me? Why do you talk over me? You know what I mean? It's really frustrating. Part of that's the little boy in him coming out. The little boy who was talked over all the time. You know what I'm saying? And then here I am taking some of those deepest wounds from childhood and heaping that on. I would never do that to my worst enemy. Why would I do that to somebody that I love? So as hard as it is now, when we fight, I'll just let him go on sometimes, on and on and on, and I think, oh Jesus, you're gonna have to be ready to because I'm going to interject so bad. But I've learned to say, is it okay if I say something now? Yeah, you know, and just try to be respectful in that. So I'm gonna let you guys go. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much that you have created this whole thing, man and woman, to be together. It's such an amazing thing. It's so beautiful. And it's just such a wonderful life. But God, it can be so torturous at the same time. And so, God, I thank you that we have your word as a guide. I thank you that we have each other to come in and talk to about this. God, I hope that in some way the experiences that I've had, things that I've been through, I can help bless these people and they can help bless me through the knowledge and wisdom that we've gained that can only come from you. God, help us to better reflect you, better model you in our marriages. God, help us to realize what we do to the ones that we love the most and to have our eyes open to pay more attention. Help us this week as we hash out some of these offenses and get them out of our life to completely be able to drop them and never pick them up again. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.